can warn you. Expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We're trying to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
A very good afternoon and welcome to The Briefing, an hour of the latest political news, debate and analysis live from Westminster on this Wednesday afternoon, another important day for British politics. I'm Darren McCaffrey and here's what's coming up between now and 4 o'clock. Just 30 minutes left of voting for Conservative MPs as they get to decide who gets through on the first round of the Conservative Party leadership race. There are currently 8 candidates standing. We're expecting a few of those not to meet that threshold of 30. Later on today, we'll have full analysis of what may well happen next and who could make it in to the second rounds. Also, Penny Mordaunt was the latest candidate to officially launch her campaign a little earlier on today, saying that the Conservative Party had lost its sense of self and vowed to return the values of small state, no tax and personal responsibility. She seems the favoured among party members, but can she get in to the final two? We'll be speaking to one of her backers live here from Parliament. And also, a bit of a rowdy start to PMQs today as 2 Alba MPs are kicked out by the Speaker. We'll be telling you precisely what happened, and we'll be speaking to one of those MPs about what the hell they were up to. That and so much more between now and 4. As always, please do get in touch. You can email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews, particularly who are you backing in this first round of the leadership contest. You will not want to go anywhere this afternoon. High drama here at Westminster. But before we get stuck in at the top of the hour, let's bring you up to date with the very latest news. To Rosie Wright, who's in the studio.
Thanks, Darren. A very good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 3. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. Well, Tory MPs are still voting in the first round of the race to replace Boris Johnson. A warning, if you're watching on television, we're going to show you some flashing images. So there are 8 leadership hopefuls still in the running. They'll have to hit a threshold of 30 votes today to stay in the race. Well, those results will be announced in 2 hours' time. A YouGov poll found the former Defence Secretary, Penny Mordaunt, is currently the favourite to win amongst Conservative voters. The former Brexit Secretary, David Davis, is backing her and says her plan for the economy is strong.
This is a thoughtful approach which will actually work. And that's the key point. Will it work? If we are running an economic policy that's working in the next general election, we'll win. If we're running one which is made up of populist nonsense, we'll lose.
Boris Johnson has defended his record in office, saying he'll leave Downing Street with his head held high. In the first Prime Minister's question since his resignation, Mr Johnson was accused of leaving behind a broken economy. The Prime Minister said he believed his team in government had done a remarkable job in helping the country through difficult times.
Last week, he resigned, accusing the Prime Minister of not conducting government properly, competently or seriously. He suggested the Prime Minister is not prepared to work hard or take difficult decisions, and implied that the Prime Minister cannot tell the public the truth. Yesterday, he claimed his big plan is to rebuild the economy. Now, even the Prime Minister must be impressed by that Johnsonian brass-neckery. Can the Prime Minister think of any jobs his former Chancellor may have had that means he bears some responsibility for an economy that he now claims is broken?
At the end of 3 years, Mr. Speaker, we got Brexit done, which he voted against 48 times. We delivered the first vaccine in the world and rolled it out faster than any other European country, which would never be possible if we listened to him, Mr. Speaker. And we played a decisive role in helping to protect the people of Ukraine from the brutal invasion of Vladimir Putin and helped to save Ukraine, Mr. Speaker.
Workers at rail operators and Network Rail have voted to strike on July the 27th. This is breaking news from the RMT union. The 24-hour action, they say, will start at 2 a.m. and it's over pay, jobs and conditions. In a statement, the RMT said the offer made by Network Rail represented a real-term pay cut for its members. Unions held 3 strikes last month, which caused travel disruption across the country. The UK economy grew by 0.5% in May, following a 0.2% drop in April. Analysts had expected that figure to remain flat. The ONS says the growth came after a bounce back across all services, manufacturing and construction, with a notable increase in demand for health services and holidays. The President of Sri Lanka has temporarily authorised the country's Prime Minister to carry out presidential duties. It's amid ongoing protests in the country caused by anger over inflation and widespread fuel and medicine shortages. The Premier has fled to the Maldives hours before he was due to resign. He's insisted he still intends to step down. Demonstrators have stormed the Prime Minister's office and continue to call for his resignation. A French Senate report has found Liverpool fans were unfairly blamed for the chaos at the Champions League final in Paris in May. Liverpool supporters tried to gain entry into the stadium with fake tickets, which resulted in some police using tear gas on fans. The report said French authorities must learn the lessons and apply them to hosting next year's Rugby World Cup and also the 2024 Olympic Games. Figures obtained by GBNews show that more than 14,000 migrants crossed the Channel this year in small boats. Well, 4 men have been arrested in National Crime Agency operation targeting migrant smuggling to the UK in lorries. A man was arrested in Dagenham on suspicion of facilitation offences, as well as 3 further men in Ilford, Streatham and Leytonstone. The arrests are linked to 2 separate events in 2019, where a total of 32 migrants were found in the back of HGV lorries in the Netherlands and France. An amber warning for extreme heat's been issued for this Sunday and next Monday. The Met Office are warning of potential exceptionally high temperatures that could impact infrastructure and travel. They also say adverse health effects leading to potential serious illness or danger to life are warned, and these are not limited to those most vulnerable to extreme heat. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to the briefing and Darren.
It is 7 minutes past 3 o'clock on this Wednesday afternoon. We're live outside Parliament. Another important day for British politics. We're on TV, online and of course on your wireless radio as well. Thank you very much indeed for your company. It is an important day because Conservative MPs are currently voting in Parliament behind me for who they want to see get through the first round of the ballot of the Conservative leadership race. A race that will see not just a new Conservative leader but indeed a new Prime Minister, we're told, by September 6th. When Boris Johnson is expected to go to the Queen to hand in formally his resignation as Prime Minister, and that the new Conservative leader, who will be announced the day before, will take over. Now, clearly one of those running is Penny Mordaunt, the International Trade Minister. She set out her stall a little bit earlier here in Westminster, talked about returning back to some basic Conservative values. I was equating herself somewhat to Paul McCartney, playing some of the classic tunes, whether that is on small states, lower taxes or personal responsibility. Let's have a listen in to what Penny Mordaunt had to say a little bit earlier.
We've got to stave off a recession. We've got to deliver on the huge ambition that the British people have, having left the European Union. We've got to catch up after COVID. We have a war. And we have a manifesto to deliver. And standards and trust to restore. The British people are fed up. They're fed up with us not delivering. They're fed up with unfulfilled promises. And they're fed up with divisive politics. So how do we turn this around? Well, first of all, we have to admit that Whitehall is broken. There are great people that work there. But in my administration, you will see it look and feel very different, very fast. We need to do some serious machinery of government changes. We're going to have a tighter cabinet. We're going to have ministers of state that have clear and timely deliverables and are powerful and can reach across Whitehall. Secondly, we need to build a modern economy. Now, you'll have heard pitches this week on tax and spend. I'm going to talk about growth and competition. My key fiscal rule is that debt as a percentage of GDP will fall over time. My monetary policy will be on controlling inflation, and our supply side reforms will yield a Brexit dividend. And we also need to let our citizens live well. From me, you're going to get a relentless focus on cost of living issues.
Now, interestingly, subsequently, since that speech, Penny Mordaunt is topping a poll according to YouGov, who've looked into Conservative Party members. She is out in the lead and indeed, according to that poll, would beat every other candidate currently in this race if she gets into the final two. That, of course, up to Conservative MPs who, as I say, are voting at the moment. We're expecting that vote to close in, 20 minutes' time. The results at around 5 p.m. this afternoon. I think it's almost certain she's going to get through to the second round, given the fact that her and Rishi Sunak have already got over 30 MPs declared publicly for them, and that is the threshold they need to meet. Well, one of those MPs backing her is the Conservative MP John Penrose, who joins me outside Parliament. John, good afternoon to you. Why is Penny Mordaunt your candidate?
Well, I've known her for years, and she is tremendously impressive. She's really good in Parliament in debates. There's a wonderful YouTube clip circulating, if your viewers want to look at it, of her taking down Angela Rayner at the dispatch box. Does it very well, doesn't get shouty, is calm, cool, but very, very clinical. She's also an original Brexiteer, which doesn't matter quite as much as it used to, but I still think is going to be important this time, not just for Conservatives, but across parts of the country at least. But she's also very determined. She understands that the country's got a lot of opportunities and has got to go through some changes. Now we are post-pandemic and post-Brexit. She understands that's necessary. We've got to move fast, and she wants to get on with it. And for me, those are the crucial things. There's some opportunities which are going begging. She seems to get it. That's the reason why I'm supporting her.
Well, so what other policy kind of platform there? I mean, she kind of talked about almost getting back to basics, if you like, back to basic Conservative values in terms of what's it, low taxation, personal responsibility, smaller.
Yeah. So I mean, it was interesting, and I thought a good point, which is that the Conservative Party works on values rather than ideology. So there's a whole series of values which
you can trace right back to Disraeli and people like that, but you've got to reinterpret them and apply them to the modern version of the modern problems today. So what she's saying is take those original conservative values, things like low taxation, personal responsibility, sound money, all those things, and then apply them to today's problems, and if we do that, then we'll come up with answers that work, that make sense, and I think go with the grain of where the British people are.
It said that I was there earlier on today, and she was asked repeatedly this question about whether she was a kind of continuity candidate, if you like, because she kept referring to the fact that she was standing on the 2019 manifesto, or the kind of manifesto that won the election, while at the same time also trying to say that she was new and fresh from Boris Johnson. Yeah. Can you square that circle?
I think I can, because I think I was in the room with you at the time, and I think what she was saying was, look, we were all elected, Boris, me, her, we were all elected on that same manifesto. There's a whole series of things there which I suspect anybody will want to deliver, no matter who wins in this election. So that is our starting point. But there are some things which I think, and she thinks, can go faster, we can do more of. She's made a couple of announcements so far, so we'll see a few more of those, I think, over the coming days. But the fundamental thing is, the reason why people voted Conservative back in 2019, there'll still be, the levelling up agenda, for example, that's still going to be there, and it's very important that we deliver on some of those promises, because that's what people voted for.
In saying that, Penny Mordaunt's not a household name, I think that's fair to accept. Many would question, she's not been in, or hadn't been in cabinet for a very long period of time. Is she experienced to take on this job? Because this job is not, being leader of the opposition.
Oh, no,
you've got time. You are going straight in during a cost of living crisis to the toughest job in the country.
It's going to require somebody who's, in the sporting term, got fire in the belly and ice in the head to be able to cope with that. I think she's got that, but she's also got the experience you're talking about. She's been Defence Secretary, for goodness sake, a couple of years ago now, but it's a job that if you can do it, it shows. And she's served as a minister in a lot of other departments too, so she's got bags of experience. She's also a Royal Naval Reservist, so she understands public service in a broader context than just in Parliament and just in politics.
What would you say, though, to our viewers, and there are quite a few of them who, like Boris Johnson, are not very happy with what's happened to him? There is this suggestion Penny Mordaunt's been running a kind of campaign behind the scenes for months. Her website was registered 2 years ago. Well, this is someone who's been very ambitious for a very long period of time. There will be a sense that some of these candidates, maybe even Penny, has been a bit treacherous in the background towards Boris.
So I don't think it's possible to argue with one question, and I appreciate you're only asking other people's questions to get the answers. But I don't think it's fair to say, nobody's heard of her, she's not well known, and at the same time say that she's been sort of treacherously plotting, because otherwise that would have showed. There is a military adage that says, prior preparation and planning prevents poor performance. So it clearly makes sense to have thought ahead, but she was scrupulously loyal, and I think that people understand that.
And just very finally, I know you weren't there, you saw a little bit of it on the TV, aside from the slightly chaotic scenes at the start. What did you make of the Prime Minister's performance today, in the sense that, it felt like he was trying to remind people of his successes, but fundamentally it felt in many ways that the party had already moved on from him.
Well, and I think that's what happens to any Prime Minister. It doesn't matter if it's Boris Johnson. I think the same thing happened to David Cameron, and before him to Tony Blair when he was in the transition to handing over to Gordon Brown. The caravan moves on, and democracy is somewhere where attention moves very promptly, and rightly so, to the next thing, the next purpose, the future. And so I don't think it's a particular a particular comment on Boris Johnson that's happened to him in the same way as it happens almost inevitably to anybody else in that situation too.
Okay, John Penrose, as always, thank you very much indeed for joining us live outside Parliament this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed. John, well, we're talking about PMQs there, weren't we? As I say, it was, in theory at least, the Prime Minister's penultimate Prime Minister's Question Time. There is one again next Wednesday, though he kind of alluded to the fact that he might not be around for it. Alluded to it, we're not entirely sure. Number 10 seemed to be denying it, but it was a rather surreal and interesting PMQs. Chaos at the start, and lots of questions, not about the Prime Minister, but about the other candidates in this race from Sir Keir Starmer. Let's have a look back at some of the highlights.
Mr. Speaker, may I welcome the new Cabinet to their places? We have a new Chancellor who accepted a job from the Prime Minister on Wednesday afternoon and then told him to quit on Thursday morning. A new Northern Ireland Secretary who once asked if you need a passport to get to Derry. And the new Education Secretary, whose junior ministers have literally been giving the middle finger to the public. It is truly the country's loss that they will only be in post for a few weeks. Now, the Prime Minister must be feeling demo puppy since he was pushed out of office. Finally, he can throw off the shackles, say what he really thinks, and forget about following the rules. So, does he agree? Does he agree it's time to scrap the absurd non-dom status that allows the super-rich to dodge tax in this country?
Well, I thank you very much, and it's perfectly true that I'm grateful for the ability to speak my mind. I never really lost, Mr. Speaker, but what I'm focusing on is continuing the government of the country. And as I've just told you, Mr. Speaker, from tomorrow, £326 is arriving. Never mind non-doms, Mr. Speaker. Doms or non-doms, I don't mind. £326 is arriving in the bank accounts of 8 million vulnerable people. And how can we do that? Because we took the decisions to get the strong economy that we currently have, that I'm afraid were resisted by growth in May at 0.5%, Mr. Speaker, which they weren't expecting. We have. As I've told you before, Mr. Speaker, 620,000 more people in payroll employment than before the pandemic began. And one of the consolations of leaving office at this particular time, Mr. Speaker, is that vacancies are at an all-time high.
Cut him some slack. Faced with an uncertain future, a mortgage-sized decorator's bill that'll be soon for somebody else's flat, I'm not surprised he's careful not to upset any future employers. So here's an even simpler one. Does he agree that offshore schemes can pose a risk because some people use them to avoid tax they owe here?
Mr. Speaker, I'm proud of the investment that this country attracts from around the world, and he's talking about offshore people investing in the UK. I'm absolutely thrilled to see that we've had, I think, 12 billion in tech alone come in the last couple of months. I think it's possible, Mr. Speaker, he's referring not to me, but to some of the 8 brilliant candidates who are currently vying for my job. Any one of them would wipe the floor with Captain Crasheroony's snooze fest, Mr. Speaker. And after a few weeks' time, that is exactly what they will do. They will unite around the winner and do just that.
He's been saying all week that he wants revenge on those that have wronged him. Here's an idea, Prime Minister. If he really wants to hit them where it hurts, he should tighten the rules on tax avoidance. But at the very least, does he agree that anyone running to be Prime Minister should declare where they and their families have been domiciled for tax purposes and whether they've ever been a beneficiary of an offshore tax scheme?
Mr. Speaker, to the best of my knowledge, everybody in this Parliament, everybody in this House pays their full whack of tax in this country, and I think that people should, members across the House should cease this constant vilification of each other. I think people pay their fair share of taxes, and quite right.
Do get in touch, by the way. That was PMQs. What are your thoughts on that? Who are you supporting in this first round of the leadership contest? GBviews at gbnews.uk, or tweet me at GBnews. We'll get to some of those in a couple of minutes. Also coming up in a couple of minutes, it is 10 minutes left until the first round polls close here at Westminster in the first round of the Conservative leadership race. We'll have all the latest on the runners and riders, who's likely to drop out and not, with our very own Tom Harwood. That's in just a matter of moments after some commercial breaks. See you soon.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
Welcome back. We're live outside Parliament on this Wednesday afternoon. Lots of you getting in touch. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Darren says, hello Darren, either Penny Mordaunt or Kemi Badenoch for me. Either comes with the political baggage most of the others have. Sorry, neither comes with that baggage. Mike says Penny is okay, but having difficulty in defining what a woman is should never be. Shan says, is the reputation of Thatcherites and Thatcher's name supposed to be a positive, uplifting thing? I voted for Brexit and Boris, but I also remember the 70s and 80s. And Dave says, you must, like me, have noticed how insecure Starmer is in Parliament. He's always flanked by Rachel Reeves and Angela Rayner. Always behind him is a bevy of other female Labour MPs, though, of course, they are the two most senior shadow cabinet members. Maybe not unsurprising, Dave. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Right, we're fast approaching 3:30. MPs will have to stop voting in the next couple of minutes in the first round of the Conservative leadership race. Outside the corridor, watching who's going in and out this afternoon, is a very own Tom Harwood, who is joining me on College Green. Tom, who have you seen voting?
Gosh, it's been a last-minute rush of voting. Of course, the voting opened at 1:30 and there was a bit of a rush then, and then a slow trickle throughout the rest of the day, but also that final rush at the end. It's interesting. Committee Room 10, the room that when you approach the committee room corridor, it opens out to. One door for them to walk in, one door for them to walk out. And by that indoor, representatives of each campaign, all wearing their little badges, most prominently the PM for PM badges. They're the big ones. It's like a little local election. Really, and they've all got their lists and they're ticking off the names who they're secretly guarding on their lists, who they think they're going to back these various campaigns. But just a couple of minutes ago, I saw none other than the former Prime Minister, Theresa May, walk in there wearing a garish green dress, but not saying who she's voting for by tradition.
Gareth show words. I'm sure others may well differ. It is interesting, though, isn't it? We don't know who she's backing. We don't know who Priti Patel's backing.
No.
Wallace. There's a lot of people undeclared yet.
There's over 100 MPs that are undeclared, which really does make this race interesting. Of course, yesterday, the nomination threshold, 20 MPs, well, 8 candidates met that threshold, but only 4 had more than 20 MPs publicly backing them. So we know that there are some MPs who are keeping their cards close to their chest and not saying who they're backing publicly. Also, we expect there may well be some skullduggery going on, some votes being lent to other campaigns to try and pursue an advantage, whether it's to split some sort of vote, to try and encourage another debate. All those sorts of games may well be being played. But ultimately, yes, a number of MPs who have not yet engaged with this process, who have not publicly declared who they're backing. So it could well be that at 5 p.m, when we hear these results, there could be some sort of upset.
Indeed, I was talking to one former cabinet minister just before I came on air. He said we're dealing with the most treacherous electorate in the world, which may well be true. So, Tom, I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit. What are you expecting to happen at 5? Well, we know Rishi Sunak, and we know that Penny Mordaunt are almost certainly through. They've got more than 30 public backers. Who else do you think might make it on, or who might drop off?
I think it's really interesting looking at those Sunak numbers. Very, very strong. Could there be more there? But also, there's been a couple of polls out now that show Rishi Sunak actually doesn't fare that well amongst the country, amongst the membership. So might that then nip off some of those people who are thinking about supporting him? Might they go somewhere else? Penny Mordaunt obviously doing very well as well. I think it's fairly safe to say that Liz Truss will make it over the line. I've been speaking to a couple of people who haven't been public in their endorsements, but seem to be saying things that are leading towards the Liz Truss direction. But I think when we're looking at those who might drop out, it's going to be a hard climb for someone like Nadeem Zouahi, who hasn't really been able to get his campaign off the ground. I think Suella Braverman might struggle as well, but one to watch, I'd say, is Kemi Badenoch. How many MPs will she get backing her? She's under the public declared number, under 30, but might she just get enough to get through to tomorrow's vote? And
isn't it fascinating that Jeremy Hunt as well, who finished second this last time round, probably, I'm going to go probably, will not get through today either.
That's a very realistic probability, although one thing to say is that in the YouGov poll that was released just this afternoon, 1:30 I think it was released, the time at the start of the voting, the one person who Rishi Sunak convincingly beats in a vote that goes to the membership in the country is Jeremy Hunt. So if I were game planning on the Rishi Sunak campaign, I might want to keep Jeremy Hunt in for as long as possible. That's not to say that they'll have as many votes as they wish to do that, but it's quite possible. It's not out of the realms of possibility that most candidates get through, because of course there are those 100 MPs who have not yet declared. It could be the case that 30 is a more easy bar, just 10 more than they needed yesterday. Perhaps that's easier to reach than some of us are thinking, but in the case that all 8 reach the 30 threshold, the one who gets the fewest votes gets automatically excluded in any case.
And we can just say it is now 3:30. That ballot has officially closed. We are expecting the counting to begin any minute now, and we're expecting the results at around 5 p.m. Tom, just before I let you go, just reflection on something else today was the PMQs. Prime Minister slightly alluding to that this might be it, the end, the final curtain, rather surreally. Number 10, dampening down that a little bit. Where are we at?
So, as far as we understand, the Prime Minister does think this might well be his last PMQs. Now, number 10 wouldn't say why that was. They're saying we're expecting the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has no plans to not attend PMQs next week. But there's an awful lot of speculation that the Prime Minister might have an international visit next week in the offing. He spoke to the Japanese Prime Minister today, who's just won re-election, and condoling on the death of Shinzo Abe as well. Perhaps a visit to Japan, a country that the UK has become closer to in election in the post-Brexit world might be in the offing. And if that's the case, the PM might not be there next Wednesday. But it won't be the last time we see him in Parliament today, because of course the government has tabled an extraordinary confidence vote in itself, which the Prime Minister, we learn, will be leading on Monday.
And it could be Dominic Raab's last moment in the sun as Deputy Prime Minister next Wednesday. We'll see, we'll see. Tom, as always, thank you very much indeed. And as I say, that ballot is now closed. Conservative members have now voted MPs in the first round of this leadership contest. Result of round 5 will of course bring you live and continuing coverage throughout the afternoon as that result comes in. We'll be talking to some of the key players as well, maybe those that have dropped out. Where will their support go? It's fascinating, entirely unpredictable. We'll have the very latest, as I say, as the afternoon draws on. But at just after 3:30, we're going to pause there on the briefing. Live here from Westminster, we're going to go back to the studio now and bring you up to date with the very latest news headlines. It's back to Rosie Wax.
Thanks, Darren. It's 3:32. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. Well, as we've just been hearing, counting has begun in the first round of the race to replace Boris Johnson. 8 leadership hopefuls are in the running. Today, they've been vying for at least 30 votes to stay in the race. The results will be announced at 5 o'clock. A YouGov poll found former Defence Secretary Penny Mordaunt is the favourite to win amongst Conservative voters. The RMT union says rail operators and workers at Network Rail have voted to strike on July the 27th. It's going to be a 24-hour set of actions. It will start at 2 a.m. It's over pay, jobs and conditions. In a statement, the RMT says the offer made by Network Rail represented a real terms pay cut for its members. The UK economy grew by 0.5% in May, following a 0.2% drop in April. Analysts had expected the figure to remain flat. The ONS says the growth came after a bounce back across all services, manufacturing and construction, with a particular increase in demand for health services and holidays. A French government report has found that Liverpool fans were unfairly blamed for the chaos at the Champions League final in Paris in May. Police fired tear gas at fans after some were accused of trying to use fake tickets to gain entry into the stadium. The report says authorities must learn lessons and apply them to hosting the next year's Rugby World Cup and the 2024 Olympic Games. An amber warning for extreme heat's been issued for this Sunday and next Monday. The Met Office are warning of the potential of exceptionally high temperatures that could impact infrastructure, travel and have adverse health effects on the general population. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.186 and 1.182 euros. The price of gold currently stands at £1,453 and 52 pence per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Very good afternoon. Welcome back to the programme. It is coming up to 23 minutes to 4 o'clock on this Wednesday afternoon. We're live outside Parliament. Another important day for politics, for British politics, most notably for the Conservative Party, as they have literally just voted MPs in the first round of the leadership ballot, expecting that result in less than 90 minutes' time. We're on TV, online, of course, and on your wireless radio. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Lots of you getting in touch, by the way, as well. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Alfred says the next leader has to be Liz Truss. David says, I support Penny Mordaunt and I vote Labour, so I speak from the Red Wall. She would be excellent. Lorraine says, I've always liked Penny Mordaunt but didn't think she'd be in the running, so glad she is. As someone said, as long as she doesn't give her support to Jeremy Hunt, because I'm not a big fan. And Jill says, really sorry to lose Boris, but supporting Penny Mordaunt as a replacement. So quite a few Penny supporters out there. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Now, let's bring in Charlie Barley. He is a former special advisor to Michael Gove, of course, the sacked former Levelling Up minister. Last week, as Boris Johnson carried out some of his last acts, certainly as Prime Minister, as not interim Prime Minister, and he joins us live outside Parliament. Charlie, very good afternoon to you. We're going to talk about the leadership race in a second. There's lots of excitement and unpredictability about that. But let's look back, if we can, a little bit to last week, because it's always important to remember it's not just cabinet ministers who lose their job, but often the staff who work with them as well. Last week was a pretty brutal week for many within government, it's fair to say.
It was brutal and bizarre in equal measure. You're in the office one day, still clearing things, clearing what the department's putting in front of you, still giving advice up until the very end, even when you can see what's happening around you. The government is in collapse mode. But you come into this game knowing that you can be in 1 minute, out the next, you roll with the punches. So I was given my marching orders that night as well, and now added to the government's unemployment statistics. So an enforced sabbatical is what we're on.
Well, indeed, apparently there's lots of job vacancies, so hopefully you should be all right. So it's all about the government. In saying that, I mean, what was it like towards the end, in the sense that many people felt the Prime Minister was slightly delusional, that he still thought up until clearly that Wednesday night that he could hold on, even as you say, the government seemed to be falling apart?
I mean, I think it was just generally sad. I was sad for Michael to lose his job in the way that he did. I was sad for the PM to finally accept the reality of what was happening around him. The government was collapsing, and it just came to a point where you can't fill the seats that you need to run the government. But he was a brilliant leader, a brilliant communicator. No one will forget what Boris did for this country, what he did for the Conservative Party in getting that 80-seat majority. It is just a shame, and as I said, incredibly sad that it ended the way that it did. But we have to move on, and we're doing that right now with a new leader.
Is the Conservative Party moving on, though? Because the fear is, of course, given the way the Prime Minister's been removed, and he made reference to the fact that, it was not clearly his decision, that the divisions that we've seen grow in the last kind of 6 months, they'll be very difficult to heal, won't they? Maybe nigh impossible this side of the general election.
Well, if you go back to, I mean, I've been around quite a while now, and from 2016 we had the debates around Brexit, we had the divisions within the party. COVID, put a lot of pressure on people. MPs, of course, having particularly different views about some of the restrictions that were put in place. I think we've gone through a long period now of division within the Conservative Party. What we need now is someone that whoever wins, and there are 8 great candidates, and I'll say that there are 8 great candidates whilst I'm still unemployed. Whoever it is, they will be able to bring the country together. They'll bring the party together and get on with making the difficult decisions, because there is going to be difficult decisions that need to be taken in the months and years ahead, and they will steer us through and win the next general election.
In saying that, your old boss is backing Kemi Badenoch. Why is that? Why is Michael pipped for her?
Kemi is brilliant, and she's a fantastic minister. She was a brilliant minister at the Department for Levelling Up. She was also brilliant at the Treasury. And I think she is ultimately, Kemi and MPs that are in ministerial posts, as Kemi is too, are the future of the party. There's no doubt about that. And I think he sees in her someone that is tough talking, won't take any wokery nonsense, and will be able to be a clean break and a breath of fresh air for the party and the country.
In saying that, it's pretty unlikely she's going to make it, isn't it, to the final two. Looking at the numbers today, and things do change, I'm not, I think this race is heading, if I can put you in that position.
Well, I think, given that I am now looking for work, it would probably be not in my interest to sort of name somebody at this stage. We'll see when we get to the final two. But it's clear that Rishi is the front runner. He's the most experienced candidate, being the Chancellor during the most difficult pandemic that we've seen, taking tough decisions. He wants to put himself forward as someone that is going to be the steady hand on the till, but also able to communicate with the country to say, look, we are in a difficult economic time, and you need to take tough choices, and he is the man that will be able to lead this country through that economic difficult period and into the next election. Alongside him, who's to say? Will it be Liz Truss? Will it be Penny? Those two seem to be the next front runners for that second place, and we'll see what happens.
Was it interesting today that Labour, in some ways, were, it was PMQs, but it was hardly ever, or Keir's questions were not about Boris Johnson, they were about the other candidates, most notably Rishi Sunak. Is he the candidate you think Labour fear most?
I think they do, and I think that that they can see that Rishi is clearly very charismatic. He's got a great PR machine. He is an oven-ready Prime Minister in that sense. And I think Labour sort of putting out the feelers now that they relish the challenge of Rishi versus Keir, I think is maybe a bit of a smokescreen that they do fear him. But Penny too, who is a brilliant candidate, who I worked with at the Cabinet Office during the pandemic. She is someone that is said at the moment not to be a household name, but she has held cabinet positions. She's taken tough decisions as Defence Secretary at International Development and during the pandemic. And she is someone that is cutting across all strands of the party and could be a very, very good leader of the party should she get that second place.
Charlie, thank you very much indeed for joining us. It's interesting you called it an oven-ready Prime Minister. Some viewers will be saying, hopefully it's not like Boris Johnson's oven-ready Brexit deal that's somewhat fallen apart a little bit around the edges of it. Charlie, thank you very much indeed. Charlie Barley, former Special Advisor to Michael Gove until last week, of course, until he was sacked by Boris Johnson. We are expecting that result from the first round, as I say, at around 5 p.m. this afternoon. Now, something else is happening, though, here at Westminster that hasn't been touched upon as much, is that Labour have been pushing for a vote of no confidence in the government. They essentially want to bring down the government and have a general election. Now, yesterday, the government seemed to upset precedent and prevent that vote from happening. However, there's been a little bit of a change today, and the government have decided to put forward their own motion of confidence in the government. It's going to start on Monday. Boris Johnson is going to head up the case for the government. Will it happen? Will the government collapse? Could we see a general election? Seems incredibly unlikely, given the fact that most Conservative MPs will certainly not back it. And in the end, does Labour really want one? Well, I put that to the Shadow Environment Minister, Jim McMahon, who joined me a little bit earlier outside Parliament. And as I say, I began by asking him, was this all politics, that Labour really wants a general election campaign? Vote of no confidence is going to go ahead next week. I mean, frankly, does the Labour Party really want an election?
Absolutely. Listen, we've had now 12 years of the Conservatives in power, and what they routinely do is to try and reset and deny the past was theirs. But the country has seen through that now. People have seen that the country hasn't worked for working people, that the government haven't been there when they need it. And frankly, people are sick in towns like mine, in regions across the country, are thinking that the decent, well-paid jobs are something of the past and not the future. And when they went to the government to say, well, what are we going to do coming through the pandemic to reset and have things different? The government just didn't have the answers. And so what we've been trying to do is say, well, what's our alternative? Because you've got to transition from a point of being an opposition to being an alternative facing the country with a new offer. So we've set out our £28 billion of a climate investment fund, and that's about investing in new technologies, in those decent, well-paid jobs that will support our regions. When you look at the Conservatives, they're completely void of any ideas. And what we've seen during the Conservative leadership contest, actually, is that they're rushing around trying to outbid, in a Dutch auction sense, on who's going to have the biggest tax cuts.
But in saying that, the reason the Labour Party are calling for this vote of no confidence is because of Boris Johnson. But Boris Johnson's going. He's resigning. He's going to be gone in a couple of months.
And that's a really important point. So the Conservatives themselves, his own cabinet ministers, have said that they don't have the confidence in him. Some have been even more brutal and said that he's a liar, he's a cheat, you can't trust a word he says, and he's not fit to govern. Well, we agree with that. He is not fit to hold the highest office of the land, and that cannot continue until potentially the 5th of September, where the whole of summer he has the highest office in the land. He occupies Downing Street, and he speaks for the nation when his own party said he's not fit for office.
In saying that, I mean, Labour don't really want an election. You can't afford one. They've got candidates in loads of seats. I mean, frankly, you know, this is just politics, really, isn't it?
No, listen, if there's an election called at the earliest opportunity, we will be ready to fight that election. We'll have an offer for the country. And listen, I'm really excited for Keir Starmer potentially to be the Prime Minister of this country. I'm really excited by our agenda.
He hasn't developed loads of policies, though.
Well, that will come, of course, through the process, and the manifesto that we'll present to the country as part of that election will be part of that. And I'll just say this, listen, when we present our manifesto, it will be fully costed and it will be tested. Just listen to the Conservative leadership candidates now who are making all these wild promises about tax cuts, and when you say, well, where's the money going to come from? They haven't got a single answer.
In saying that, you know, it is a pretty eclectic cross-section of the Conservative Party who are standing. They have got lots of policy ideas. Mad or maybe not they may be, that's up for you to decide. But there is talent there. Isn't that the point, that the Conservative Party actually has got the ability to reinvent itself?
I think what Boris Johnson has been able to do successfully is to convince people in his party that anybody can be the Prime Minister. The bar has been set so low that anybody on the back benches thinks that they can rise to the top and have the highest office of the land. We don't believe that. We believe being the Prime Minister of this country is something that, you know, this is not about people just queuing up in the hope that if they put the name on the ballot paper, they might just get a position on the cabinet, or if they promise one tax cut that bit more than the next person, that they'll manage to get one more vote than the next. We believe it's more important than that. So ask each of those candidates, well, what's your agenda for the country? How are you going to reset the economy? How are you going to reinvigorate our regional economies? How are you going to make work pay? Because when I go back to the northwest, people are sick and tired of working all the hours God sends and still not being able to live a decent life. And when I look at every one of the 8 people now that have been shortlisted potentially to be the next Prime Minister on the Conservative side, I don't see a single answer coming from them.
Just very finally, though, on that, and I'm sure your constituents feel the same, you know, what they're not interested in probably is a Conservative leadership race, but they're probably not interested in having a general election. It's like Brenda from Bristol, not another one. I mean, at the end of the day, actually, doesn't everyone in that place behind you need to concentrate on sorting out the cost of living crisis, getting the economy on a firmer footing? They're kind of a bit bored of elections and internal party politics.
I think what the last 12 years have demonstrated, and actually Boris Johnson's premiership in particular, is it really does matter who's in government. And you cannot achieve the change in our country, in our economy, in our society. You can't level up in the way that's been muted, but you don't see the delivery. You can't do that with words and just by changing the person at the top. The problem with the Conservative Party isn't just Boris Johnson, isn't just the person at the top. It's all those that have supported his leadership and allowed him to behave the way that he has. It's corrupt from the top to the bottom, and we want to go to the country and let them decide who the next Prime Minister of this country is going to be. And I'm absolutely confident that when they see our agenda, when Keir is put to the public, that they'll come to Labour.
There you go. That was Labour's Jim McMahon speaking to me a little bit earlier. Lots have been piling in with your thoughts on the Conservative leadership race. GBViews at GBnews.uk. Mark says, hi Darren, from me, Penny Mordaunt is the only candidate that could steady the waters. I resigned my membership of the Conservative Party as I could not support Boris Johnson. Eric says, why is this country so inept at producing a centre-right party? Surely it's what most viewers want. Clive says, as a Conservative Party member, I have to say it beggars belief that their MPs are so stupid. None of these 8 candidates is ever going to be half as good as Boris was. They're destined to lose power, but not before I resign from the party. GBViews at GBnews.uk, or indeed tweet us at GBnews. Now, if you're watching Prime Minister's Question Time a little earlier, you may have seen at the start there was somewhat of a protest from 2 Alba MPs who were told to shut up or leave. And in the end, they were dragged out. Let's have a listen in to what Sir Lindsay Hoyle had to say at the start of Prime Minister's Question Time.
Order! Order! I say to the honourable gentleman, give me this, I will not tolerate such behaviour. If you want to go out now, but if you stand again, I will order you out. Make your mind up. Either shut up and get out. I now warn of the honourable members that if they persist in refusing to comply with my order to withdraw, I shall be content compelled to name both of them, which may lead to them being suspended from the House. I order... Shh. Neil Hanvey, I am now naming you and Kenny McCaskill to leave this chamber. Sergeant, deal with them.
Well, both those MPs have subsequently been suspended for Parliament for 5 days. One of them is Neil Hanvey, as you heard there, and he joined me live outside Parliament. Neil, what was all that about?
Well, I mean, it was a response to a Prime Minister who is not willing to listen or understand the mandate that was given to the Scottish Government in the recent parliamentary elections to bring forward a reconsideration of the question of independence. And as I think one of your viewers mentioned just a moment ago, that if Conservative Party members are not willing to support this Prime Minister, then why should the Scottish people respect his refusal holding Scotland's democracy hostage? Why should we respect that? And it's effectively direct action activism in the chamber, giving voice to the concerns of our supporters in the wider Yes movement, to say that up with this we will not put.
Yeah, but there's a lot of issues that a lot of people are very animated about in Parliament. The whole point of Parliament, though, is that you have to respect others' members and others' views. And our parliamentary system cannot work if everyone just goes rogue.
Well, yeah, I mean, OK, well, let's talk about going rogue. For the whole time that I've been in Westminster, the UK government have gone rogue. I've tried to get answers to questions on COVID, I've tried to get answers to questions on the Constitution, but this government won't answer simple questions, and they dismiss out of hand the absolute right, the claim of right of the Scottish people to give voice to their constitutional future. And that is not going rogue, that's asserting our Scottish sovereignty. The people of Scotland are sovereign. Our sovereignty does not rest in Westminster.
Well, technically at the moment it does. Now, clearly that's open to the debate, but the whole point is, Neil, we can go through this over and over again. I mean, there is no overwhelming change in terms of, you look at every single opinion poll in terms of people supporting Scottish independence. I mean, it's pretty 50-50. There's no overwhelming reason to call another referendum, is there?
Well, that 50-50 is an increase of 5% on the result in 2014. And so that is progress, and that has been in the vacuum of a lack of progress in Westminster and in the Scottish Parliament to open the discussion, to have a further debate, and in fact to even campaign for independence. So our view is that with a campaign for independence we can push that number up significantly. We saw an increase from 26 to 30% up to that 50% ahead of the vow in the last referendum, and so we'll be embarking on a campaign throughout the summer to speak to the people of Scotland about a renewed case, and we've got a date next year, 19th of October, and we'll be pushing towards that date. It's not too late for Westminster to give that Section 30 order and for Scotland to be allowed to have their say.
Neil Hanvey, as always, from the Alba Party, thank you very much indeed. Suspended from Parliament for 5 days, but I'm sure you'll be back next week just in time for the summer recess. That is almost it from me from Westminster for now. Coming up next, though, it's Colin Brazier, who's in the studio on air in just a couple of minutes. Colin, what's on your programme? May I dare guess?
You can probably guess. I tell you what, I'm not sure would be on my programme, Darren. The interview you just did with that Alba MP. I'm not sure. I mean, you've taken a different view, and I get it. I'm not sure somebody who tries to disrupt parliamentary proceedings in the way that Alba MP did should then get the opportunity to use the pulpit we provide to spread their message. I think they've disqualified themselves for at least a day. Anyway, that's my tendentious opinion. You're right, Darren, we're talking about the leadership election. Penny Mordaunt, that lead in that YouGov poll is visible from space. The new NASA Space Telescope can see that lead. We may all as well pack up and give up now if it's true. And I'm looking at the figures, Darren. You've been looking at them all afternoon. Penny Mordaunt, 27% of Tory party members. I know the poll's not gigantic. It's under 1,000, the sample. But she's twice as far ahead as the next nearest candidate. She's going to win, isn't she? She's going to win when it comes, if she gets to the final
you'd have to say,
and what do we know about her? We know very little. Let's know more. Let's find out more about who Penny Mordaunt is.
Indeed, you're right, though, and the big question is if she gets to the final two. You're right. If she does, though you're also right in suggesting that race will be wide open. Colin, thank you. We'll be with you, as I say, in just a couple of minutes' time. That is it from me, from outside Parliament for today. We'll have continuing coverage as we're expecting that result in just over an hour's time of the first round of the Conservative leadership battle. Do not go anywhere. Stick with GB News this afternoon. I'll be back tomorrow. Well, in fact, I'll be back throughout the afternoon, but I'll be back with the programme tomorrow at 3. For now, thank you for watching. We'll leave you with the weather. It's going to stay hot. I'll see you soon.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's turned into another fine day for many, with warm sunshine across large parts of the country and dry for most, but not for all. There are some showers coming along for Scotland and Northern Ireland. With low pressure to the far north, we are seeing some influence from that, but high pressure remains close to